In this part of perimeter controls, we want to discuss defining the boundary of your project. There are a variety of perimeter controls that are out in the market that we can utilize. You can actually grade the site in such a way that you're actually creating the perimeter control by creating the shoulders of the project higher and lower in the center. Or you could create a berm or a channel around the perimeter of the project. There's lots of perimeter control tools that are out there that you can help you manage your borders. You first need to identify your site and make sure that people know what is your project and what is not. Oftentimes this is done by something orange. We call it safety fence or snow fence, or now there's an orange colored sediment fence that can serve a dual purpose. Silt fence or sediment fence is a BMP. However, a lot of people have had some challenges when utilizing it as a BMP on projects. It is not filter fabric. That is a misnomer unless you buy a very specific geosynthetic on the face of the sediment fence. It's a barrier. It's meant to be a separator. It's also a sail to the wind. And in a challenging wind environment, your said fence needs to be robust enough to hold up to that wind. Otherwise, it's going to rip into shreds. And I will say that if you're relying on said fence to be the only thing that manages your perimeter, that project better be relatively small or you're going to have some significant challenges moving forward. Just like castles build moats and walls, we're trying to do the same thing on our project by creating separation between what could be coming to us and preventing what is on our site from leaving. Installation of these sediment fences requires that you're trenching them in and burying the tail into the ground all the way or bury to the bury line so that when you're not seeing the bury line when you walk by. When installing it along contours and along the perimeter of your project, you always want to turn the terminal end of the fence back into the project so that you're not getting water to shoot along the bottom and out into the right of way. And you want to make sure that the fence comes back into the site, creates a little pocket where the water can deposit the sediment there. When you're putting two pieces of sediment fence together, if you're using a non-reinforced fence or a pocketed fence, you can roll the two ends together to get a contiguous piece. Or if you're doing something like a wire back or reinforced fence, you need to have at least 12 to 18 inches of overlap, post to post, shingled in the direction of the flow so the water goes past the connection and can't go between the seams. Wattles are another perimeter control that are often used on projects. They're often used on projects where there's a lot of wind or potentially on projects where you want to leave the perimeter control in place and walk away from the project at the end. Wattles are often made out of straw, but there are all kinds of different wattles that are out there. They're mostly cylindrical products, and if you take a cylindrical product and you put that cylindrical product directly on the ground, there's often not a lot of surface area coming in contact with the ground, and water's gonna go underneath. So just like sediment fence, you need to create erosion to prevent erosion by trenching in a wattle. In other words, you need to give it a 2 to 3 inch little nest for the wattle to sit into in that pocket and then backfill the uphill edge of that wattle. What's important about your wattle selection is understanding what type of netting is on the outside. Some can be burlap, some can be green netting, some can be black netting, some can be white netting. They all have different longevity to them. The nettings have different biodegradable timelines to them. You might need to go back on some projects and pull the netting back out because they don't break down in time. So really making decisions about what wattle you're going to utilize has a lot to do with how long you want it to last and whether you're going to walk away from it and leave it on the site. When staking in wattles, we oftentimes would see where the stake goes right through the center of the wattle. If you've ever done that before on 20 feet of wattle, you know how tired your forearm is by the time you're done. There could be alternative staking methods where you drive it 3/4 of the way through the downhill edge, or you use the crisscross method where you actually are not penetrating the wattle at all and you're driving the stakes on either side of the wattle, pinching the wattle in place. That way you're going to retain the integrity of the wattle longer, but should not be done on steeper projects. There are also a lot of synthetic or reusable wattles that are out there, and these wattles oftentimes have a flap associated to them, very similar to said fence. You've got an extra fabric flap that gets buried into the ground, and that allows the entire profile of the product to stay above the ground so that you're not losing that 2 to 3 inches of freeboard like you would on a straw wattle by burying it in the ground. They stay above the ground, they're reusable, they can go from project to project. They can also be applied on hard surfaces. They're good for concrete cuts or areas where you can't trench into the asphalt subgrade to get the straw wattle or said fence in there. Another biodegradable perimeter control that's out there, it's not necessarily just a barrier, it also can be a filtration device, could be a compost sock or a compost berm. Compost socks are blown in. It looks like a sausage being extruded onto the ground in its casing. They don't need to be trenched in because, for those of you that know, have ever shoveled wet compost before, there's a lot of weight to it. It conforms to the surface of the ground. The advantage of a compost sock is that at the end of the project, you slice open and get rid of the netting and pull the compost back onto the project. Compost socks are available in different diameters and can come pre-packaged on a pallet, or they can be blown in place on the project. Compost berms are berms of unconfined compost, so they don't have a netting. They're blown in place on the property, and it's essentially a berm that acts like a perimeter control that provides some filtration to dirty water leaving the site. I want to talk a little about construction entrances and getting on and off your project. These are high traffic areas where you're going to disturb a lot of soils and you need to have good transition zones. We're not just talking about big projects here, we're also talking about the small projects as well. What we want to prevent is track out, or sometimes we call these slug trails coming off the site. It's an arrow pointing right back to the project and showing that you're not controlling your pollutants. We want to make sure that we're retaining the soil on the project and not allowing it to leave. There are entrances that you can build on your project with rock and geosynthetic, or there are proprietary entrances that are out there that you can utilize. If you're going to build something and you put 10 pounds of rock on 10 pounds of mud, what do you get? You get 20 pounds of mud. You need to make sure that before you put the rock down, you're underlaying that rock with a geosynthetic separator so that when you run over the rock, the earth is not going to pump up through the rock and consume your investment into the soil. You want to have a nice long entrance and support it with established interior access roads when feasible. Now, if you don't want to leave that entrance permanent on the site, or you're not going to pave over it, there are proprietary products that you can put down and then take back with you. A couple of them are heavy-duty geosynthetics that can be rolled up out of your truck, and then you can roll them back up and put them in your truck when you're done. Or there are panels that are available that can be placed down and you can run over the top of them, and they have dimples or ribs on them that open the tread of the tires and knock the dirt off the tread, and you tie multiple panels together to make as long of an entrance as you need. Panels can be made from steel, plastic, and rubber, and they have different weights to them. Some of them are man lifts and some require equipment to install. So you need to understand which one will do the work for you in the space that you have.